The fluorescent lights at the Pilot Travel Center buzzed like dying insects against the Nevada darkness. It was 11:47 p.m. on October 15th, 2009, when Mariah Deane swiped her debit card for the last time. Coffee, black, and a bag of sunflower seeds for the long drive home. She never made it. The security camera caught her walking back to her silver Honda Civic, keys jingling in her hand, her nursing scrubs still wrinkled from a 12-hour shift at the Reno hospital. The parking lot was alive with the rumble of diesel engines and the hiss of air brakes. 18-wheelers lined up like sleeping giants in the amber glow of the truck stop lights. Maria was 26. She had kind eyes and a laugh that could fill a room. She was driving home to her apartment on the outskirts of Carson City, a 40-minute trip she'd made countless times along Interstate 80. Her mom was expecting a call when she got home safe. That call never came. She was the type of person who would text you if she was going to be 5 minutes late. Her mother, Susan Deane, would tell police the next morning. When midnight passed and I hadn't heard from her, I knew something was wrong. The Nevada Highway Patrol found Mariah's car at 6:15 a.m., abandoned on the shoulder of I-80, about 12 miles east of the truck stop. The driver's door was ajar. Her purse was on the passenger seat, wallet intact, credit cards untouched. Her cell phone lay shattered on the asphalt beside the car, as if it had been thrown or dropped. But Mariah was gone. Detective Ray Morrison had worked missing persons for 8 years. But something about this case felt different from the moment he arrived at the scene. The car's position bothered him. It sat perfectly parallel to the white line, as if someone had carefully pulled over and parked. Not the frantic angle you'd expect from a breakdown or an emergency. There was no sign of mechanical trouble. Morrison said battery was fine, plenty of gas, tires looked good. This wasn't a roadside emergency. This was something else. The initial investigation moved fast. Police canvassed the truck stop, interviewed the night clerk, pulled security footage from every angle they could find. The cameras showed Mariah leaving the store at 11:49 p.m. But the parking lot cameras had blind spots. Too many blind spots. They traced her movements on I-80 using traffic cameras, but the trail went cold at mile marker 45. Just past where her car was found. It was as if she had simply vanished into the desert night. The truck stop's manager, a weathered man named Bill Kowalski, handed over everything he had. Customer receipts, employee schedules, even the handwritten logs that drivers used to record their rest stops. Back in 2009, not everything was digital. Drivers still filled out paper trip sheets, scribbling rig numbers and timestamps in barely legible handwriting. We had dozens of trucks that night, Kowalski told detectives. It was a busy stop. Always is on Thursday nights. Guys trying to make their Friday deliveries. The investigation consumed Morrison for months. He followed every lead, interviewed every trucker they could track down, analyzed phone records and credit card transactions. The case file grew thick with dead ends and false hopes. Mariah's family never stopped looking. Her mother Susan organized search parties, plastered missing person flyers across 3 states, and called the detective's office every week for updates. Her father, a quiet man named Tom, who worked construction, drove the stretch of I-80 between the truck stop and where her car was found so many times that other drivers started recognizing his pickup truck. I kept thinking I'd see something the police missed, Tom said years later, some sign that would bring her home. But as months turned to years, the active investigation wound down. Other cases demanded attention. The file moved to the cold case division. Mariah's story faded from the local news, though it never faded from the hearts of those who loved her. Detective Morrison retired in 2018, but he kept copies of Mariah's case files in a box in his garage. Every few months, he'd pull them out, spread the photographs and witness statements across his kitchen table, and stare at them like a puzzle missing crucial pieces. There were so many trucks that night, he'd mutter to his wife. So many possibilities. But without digital records, without GPS tracking, it was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected source. Betty Martinez had worked as a dispatcher for Consolidated Freight Lines for 37 years. She was the kind of employee companies dream about: meticulous, reliable, and completely devoted to keeping track of every detail. When she announced her retirement in late 2023, the company began the massive task of clearing out her office. That's when they found the boxes. 3 cardboard file boxes, stuffed with handwritten trip sheets dating back to 2000. These weren't official company records. They were Betty's personal backup system. For decades, she'd made photocopies of every driver's paperwork before filing the originals, storing her copies in boxes under her desk. "I never trusted computers," Betty explained. "Papers don't crash. Papers don't get deleted. I always said you need a backup for your backup." The company's new IT director, fresh out of college and tasked with digitizing everything, almost threw the boxes away. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the neat handwriting, or the rubber bands holding each month's papers together with military precision. Instead, he called the Nevada State Police. Detective Sarah Chen had inherited Mariah Deane's case when she joined the cold case unit. She was young, ambitious, and had a reputation for seeing patterns that others missed. When the boxes arrived at her office, she knew she was looking at something special. Most cold cases stay cold because the evidence isn't there, Chen said, but sometimes the evidence is there. It's just buried under years of bureaucracy and filing systems. Chen spent weeks going through Betty Martinez's meticulous records, cross-referencing driver names and rig numbers with Department of Transportation inspection logs. It was tedious work, but she had something earlier investigators didn't: modern database technology and the ability to search through years of trucking records with a few keystrokes. The pattern emerged slowly, like a photograph developing in a dark room. On October 15, 2009, 17 different trucks had logged rest stops at the Pilot Travel Center between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. Betty's papers showed each driver's name, their rig number, and the time they'd signed in and out. But one entry stood out. Rig number 471, driver Dale Hutchins, signed in at 11:52 p.m., signed out at 12:18 a.m. The timing was perfect. Mariah had left the truck stop at 11:49 p.m. Her car was found 12 miles down the road. Dale Hutchins had been at the truck stop during the exact window when she disappeared, and he'd stayed for 26 minutes, longer than most drivers, who were just grabbing coffee and fuel. Chen ran Dale Hutchins through every database she could access: DIAT records, criminal background checks, employment history. What she found sent a chill down her spine. Hutchins had been driving trucks for 22 years. He'd worked for 6 different companies, always moving on after a year or two. His route covered 11 western states, and his employment gaps matched up with several unsolved disappearances of young women near truck stops and highway rest areas. But most importantly, Hutchins was still alive, still driving, still covering the same routes he'd been running in 2009. The arrest required delicate coordination. Hutchins was currently hauling a load from Los Angeles to Denver, somewhere on I-40 in Arizona. Chen worked with law enforcement across 3 states to track his current location without spoiling him. They found him at a Love's Travel stop outside Flagstaff, fueling up for the final push to Colorado. When the Arizona Highway Patrol surrounded his rig, Hutchins didn't run. He just sat behind the wheel, hands visible on the steering wheel. "Wait," he looked tired, the arresting officer reported, like he'd been expecting this for a long time. The search of Hutchins' truck cab revealed a treasure trove of evidence. Under the passenger seat, investigators found a collection of small items that made their blood run cold: a hair clip with long brown strands still attached, an earring, a cell phone case, and tucked behind the CB radio, a plastic soda bottle that would change everything. The bottle was old, the label faded, but it still contained traces of saliva on the rim. DNA testing revealed a match to biological evidence recovered from Mariah Deane's car 14 years earlier, evidence that had been carefully preserved but never matched to a suspect. The science was clear. Dale Hutchins had been in Mariah's car. The confession came 3 days after his arrest, in a windowless interview room at the Nevada State Police headquarters. Hutchins sat across from Detective Chen and Morrison, who had come out of retirement for this moment. "I've been carrying this for 14 years. Hutchins said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every mile, every stop, every time I saw a silver Honda, I thought out that night." The story he told was both simple and horrifying. He'd noticed Mariah at the truck stop, walking alone to her car. Something about her reminded him of his ex-wife. He said, the anger that had been building during a difficult divorce, the loneliness of life on the road, the isolation that comes with endless hours of driving through the darkness. "I followed her," he admitted. "Didn't really have a plan, just followed her headlights on I-80. When she pulled over, I think she had car trouble, or maybe she was getting a phone call. I stopped behind her." What happened next was the nightmare that Susan and Tom Deane had imagined 1,000 times over the past 14 years. Hutchins approached Mariah's car under the pretense of offering help. When she rolled down her window, he forced his way inside. "She fought," he said, staring at his hands. "God, she fought so hard. But I was bigger, and I was angry, and I wasn't thinking straight." He drove her car to a remote area in the desert, 20 miles from the highway. What he did to Mariah there, he told investigators, would stay between him and the lawyers. But when it was over, when the rage had burned itself out, and the reality of what he'd done crashed down on him, he buried her in a shallow grave among the sagebrush and Joshua trees. Then he drove her car back to the highway, wiped down the surfaces he'd touched, and walked the 12 miles back to where he'd left his rig, idling on the shoulder. The whole thing took less than 4 hours. By dawn, he was crossing into Utah, just another trucker making his delivery schedule. "I thought about turning myself in 1,000 times, Hutchins told the detectives. "Every time I drove past that truck stop, every time I saw a missing person poster with her face on it. But I was a coward. I just kept driving." The recovery of Mariah's remains took 2 weeks. Hutchins led investigators to the general area, but 14 years of wind and weather had changed the landscape. Ground-penetrating radar finally located the grave site, hidden beneath a growth of scrub brush that had taken root in the disturbed earth. Susan Deane was there when they brought her daughter home. She stood at the edge of the desert, watching the forensics team work with the careful precision of archaeologists. After 14 years of not knowing, of lying awake at night wondering if Mariah was still alive somewhere, if she was suffering, if she was trying to come home, finally, there was an answer. "It wasn't the answer we wanted," Susan said at a press conference the next day. "But it was the truth, and Mariah deserved the truth." The case sent shockwaves through the trucking community. Dale Hutchins had been a ghost, moving from company to company, state to state, leaving a trail of questions that nobody had thought to ask. How many other truck stops had he visited? How many other young women had crossed his path during those late-night fuel stops and rest breaks? Detective Chen opened investigations into 17 unsolved disappearances across Hutchins' route history. 3 cases showed promising connections, similar circumstances, similar timelines, all involving women who had vanished near truck stops along major interstate highways. "The trucking industry moves millions of people safely every year," said Frank Morrison, no relation to the detective, who served as spokesman for the American Trucking Association. "But it only takes one person like Dale Hutchins to remind us that evil can hide behind any occupation, any uniform, any seemingly normal life." The trial began 18 months later. Hutchins pled guilty to first-degree murder and kidnapping, accepting a life sentence without the possibility of parole. His lawyer advised against a trial, knowing that the DNA evidence was unshakable and that his client's confession had been recorded from multiple angles. In the courtroom, Susan and Tom Deane sat in the front row, holding hands as they listened to the details of their daughter's final hours. It was the hardest thing they'd ever done, but they needed to hear it. They needed to know that justice was finally being served. "Mariah was a healer," Susan said in her victim impact statement. "She spent her life taking care of other people, making them feel better when they were sick or scared. She didn't deserve what happened to her. No one does." Dale Hutchins listened without emotion, as the families of 3 other suspected victims spoke about their losses. When given the chance to address the court, he stood slowly and faced the gallery. "I can't undo what I did," he said. "I can't give you back your daughters, your sisters, your friends. All I can do is tell you that I'm sorry and that I'll spend every day for the rest of my life wishing I could change that night in 2009. He was led away in shackles, beginning a sentence that would likely end only with his death. The case officially closed on a grey December morning in 2020. Detective Chen filed the final paperwork, then walked to her car, carrying a small cardboard box containing Mariah's personal effects, things that had been held as evidence for 15 years and were finally being returned to her family. The drive to the Deane house took 20 minutes through Reno's quiet residential streets. Susan met her at the door, accepting the box with hands that trembled slightly. Inside were Mariah's nursing school ring, a bracelet her grandmother had given her, and the sunflower seeds she'd bought at the truck stop, the last thing she'd ever purchased. "It's strange," Susan said, holding the unopened bag of seeds. "All these years, I kept thinking about that security camera footage. Seeing her walk out of that store, looking so normal, so alive. She was probably thinking about getting home, maybe planning what to watch on TV, or whether she had enough milk for morning coffee. Just normal thoughts." She had no idea. Detective Chen nodded. She'd seen that footage dozens of times, studying every frame for clues they might have missed. The image of Mariah Deane, walking into the Nevada night, keys in hand, had haunted the investigation for 15 years. "The hardest part isn't the violence," Chen said. "It's the randomness. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong person, behind her on the highway. If she'd left the hospital 5 minutes later, or if Hutchins had stopped at a different truck stop, or if her car hadn't had whatever problem made her pull over, she'd probably be alive today." Susan walked Chen to the door, then paused on the threshold. "You know what I think about now," she said. "I think about that dispatcher, Betty Martinez. She probably had no idea that keeping those old papers in boxes under her desk would solve murder. She was just doing her job, being careful, being thorough, but because of her, Mariah can finally rest in peace." The Pilot Travel Center still operates along I-80, its fluorescent lights still buzzing against the Nevada darkness. Truckers still stop for coffee and fuel, travelers still stretch their legs and grab snacks for the road ahead. A small memorial plaque near the front entrance honors Mariah Deane's memory, though most people pass by without noticing it. But the trucking industry has changed since 2009. Digital logbooks have replaced handwritten trip sheets. GPS tracking monitors every mile of every route. Background checks are more thorough, and companies share information about problem drivers in ways they never did before. "Technology isn't perfect," said Detective Chen, "but it makes it a lot harder for someone to disappear into the system the way Dale Hutchins did. Every mile is tracked, every stop is recorded, every interaction leaves a digital fingerprint. Still, she knows that evil doesn't announce itself with warning signs and flashing lights. It drives ordinary trucks on ordinary highways, stopping at ordinary truck stops where ordinary people are just trying to get home safely." The case files for Mariah Deane now rest in a filing cabinet in the basement of the Nevada State Police headquarters, officially closed but never forgotten. Detective Chen keeps a photo on her desk, not of the crime scene or the evidence, but of Mariah in her nursing scrubs, smiling at a hospital Christmas party just a few weeks before she died. "Every cold case tells a story," Chen said, "but they all end the same way, with someone who didn't make it home. That's what keeps me working these cases. Not the puzzles or the detective work, but the families who are still waiting for answers. On quiet nights, when the Nevada wind whistles through the sagebrush and the interstate hums with the endless flow of traffic, you might find Susan Deane standing at her daughter's grave in the Carson City Cemetery. The headstone is simple: Mariah Deane, 1983-2009. Beloved daughter, dedicated nurse, bright light, taken too soon. But Susan knows the real memorial to her daughter isn't carved in granite. It's in the changes that followed her death, the improved tracking systems, the enhanced background checks, the database searches, that might prevent another family from enduring 15 years of questions without answers. Mariah always wanted to help people. Susan said, even in death, she's still helping, still making a difference, still bringing light to dark places. The last entry in the case file is a handwritten note from Detective Morrison, added the day Dale Hutchins was sentenced. For 15 years, this case represented everything frustrating about police work, all the evidence you need scattered across different systems, different states, different decades. But it also represents everything beautiful about police work: the persistence, the dedication, the refusal to give up on someone who couldn't speak for herself. Mariah Deane was a stranger to most of the people who worked to solve her case. But she became family, and we never give up on family. The fluorescent lights still buzz at truck stops across America. 18-wheelers still line up like sleeping giants in the amber glow of parking lot lights, and somewhere in the darkness, between here and there, between departure and arrival, the memory of a young nurse who never made it home serves as a reminder that justice may be delayed, but it's never truly forgotten. In the end, it wasn't high-tech forensics or brilliant detective work that solved Mariah Deane's murder. It was an old-school dispatcher who believed in keeping paper backups, a young detective who saw patterns in chaos, and the simple truth that some secrets are too heavy to carry forever. Dale Hutchins will spend the rest of his life in a cell, counting the miles he'll never drive and the stops he'll never make. But every time a truck driver logs into a digital system, every time a missing person case gets solved through modern technology, every time a family gets the answers they deserve, Mariah Deane's story continues. She never made it home that October night in 2009, but in a way, she's been helping others find their way home ever since. The Nevada wind carries her memory across the desert, past the truck stops and highway markers, through the sagebrush and Joshua trees, to a place where the fluorescent lights can't reach and the diesel engines can't drown out the whisper of a truth that refused to stay buried. Justice, like the desert itself, has its own timeline. It may take 15 years, or 50, or longer, but it comes eventually, carried on the wind and written in the careful handwriting of someone who never threw away a piece of paper that might matter someday. In a cardboard box, under a dispatcher's desk, the answer was waiting all along.